Welcome to the Gritty Podcast, friends. I am your host, Brian Call, and I am joined by my brother, Brent Call.
Hey, guys.
Today's podcast is with Ryan Michler. It's part 2. What did you think of this episode?
I love Ryan. I love everything about Ryan. I love Ryan's beard. I love Ryan's voice. I love Ryan's ideas.
Did we talk about the beard in part 1 or part 2 of the podcast? I think part 1.
Actually, we did a bunch of segments with Ryan.
Yeah. Well, we did.
Yeah. I forgot all about those.
Well, the beard thing is a question we ask Ryan. It comes out in either it already did or it's coming forward for those that are a Michler fan. Order of Man, he has a very, very manly beard.
It's a luscious Yosemite Sam type-ish beard, but
it's really squared off.
It's really squared off. He has a good mustache along with it.
Yeah.
And it's like strawberry blonde.
Yeah.
There's a little gray going in it.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a manly beard.
And then he also kind of had a cold, so he sounded even more rugged than he normally does.
Yeah. Well, on this episode, we talk about his journey in hunting, archery a little bit, and how hunting increases, I don't know, the art of manliness or
He takes the principles from Order of Man, and we show how they apply to hunting, and how hunting helps apply to the principles from the Order of Man. They kind of go
very
hand
well
in
said,
hand.
brother.
You're welcome.
Very well
I've
said.
been practicing.
So before we get into that, we have a few comments or questions we're going to read through. So you got a question from a listener.
Yes.
We have a mean comment and a nice comment we're going to share today.
So my comment, it's more of a question / debate.
Let's start with a question.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'm going to read what I got. This is from David Grant. Thanks, David. It says, a nice letter and a counterpoint. Brian, been listening to your podcast for about 6 months. I have to say I love your tenacious attitude and the variety of guests you bring on, especially that Ryan Carter guy. I found his thoughts on early season very useful. Thanks for being a solid source for motivation and new ideas. See, that's nice.
That is very nice.
Now he's gonna.
What was his name?
David Grant.
David Grant. Thank you, David. Appreciate that very much.
But this is where you part ways. The real reason I'm emailing it is this. I think you've missed a critical issue with the Zero. The Garmin Zero.
Right.
My concern is it may backfire and cause more wounding than it avoids. You and others obviously have the skill to shoot a bow at the distances. What that means?
Basically the distances it can provide.
Okay.
Range for you.
However, much like we see in Colorado with some of the dial turret rifle scopes, I'm worried guys will think that function will give them a longer effective range and then punch one into the gut. I'm not sure if we can really legislate this poor decision-making away, but it would make me rest easier if influential guys like you brought that to light. Not everybody can shoot like Snyder, but a lot of guys are convinced they can. Thanks for actively seeking feedback. It's refreshing. Stay gritty, Dave.
Okay. I understand that concern, but I have a life philosophy, if you will, that I live by. I am not a fan of legislating against useful tools because we're afraid someone might abuse those tools.
You mean like a gun?
So gun is a perfect example. I'm not a fan of banning guns because someone might use one to shoot somebody, to murder someone. You don't ban cars because someone might drive one recklessly. You don't take useful tools when used properly and in a proper way. You don't take those and ban them because you're afraid people might use them in an unethical way. Okay, and that's a philosophy I take across the board and part of that is because I have an inherent belief in humanity and that the humanity is actually, on the whole, good. If it wasn't, we wouldn't have America.
Yep,
we wouldn't be where we are today. So I think that it's a bad idea to ban things or prevent things from being available, whatever, make laws around them because people might abuse them. You don't punish all the good people because a few people might use them, unethically or immorally. So the Zero comes into the same category for me. You don't ban something that makes someone more accurate, in terms of accuracy, in terms of judging, fielding yardage, and having a single pin level of accuracy on your sight. You don't You don't ban that because of the potential that someone might be unethical with it.
Well, my thing is, Brian, is you've actually shot the zero a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that it's any different than a regular sight? I mean, it's a single pin sight that pops up. You range. Do you think this guy? His fear is people are going to get confidence that they're really good when they're really not.
I don't think that the zero sight is gonna. If
not
you're a
gonna-
guy that is taking shots that are reckless, if you're a guy that's taking shots he can't make, the zero doesn't. In my opinion, the zero doesn't change that person. That doesn't make them more reckless. They're just as reckless as they were before. I don't think it takes someone who is very ethical and respects wildlife and is very careful about shot selection, someone who, you know, is deeply concerned about, you know, taking an animal effectively and efficiently. I don't think that person now, because he has a zero, starts taking shots that he shouldn't. In one sense, I actually think, because the zero, you know, it's difficult to get a zero for most guys and most setups, probably, to get a zero to shoot beyond 90 yards.
It's not going to be the new guy that's just getting into bow hunting isn't going to pick up a zero. He's not going to spend that kind of dough.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, there's quite a few people who get into archery because they like
Gear,
because it's cool. And so, and believe me, like, having the zero makes it fun. It adds another level of fun to the whole shooting a bow. I mean, I get to tinker with different arrow weights, different broadhead styles, different lighted nock setups, different releases, and I don't have to get a different bow for that or sight in a whole new sight with a sight tape.
Mm-hmm.
I basically have all the flexibility built into that one sight. Range finding tech aside, it still allows me to do so many fun things with it. And then I can use it to track my shot. Did I shoot the shot smoothly, or was I canting the bow
to the left or
to the right? It'll tell me those things on each shot. It'll record like a target session for me and give me data on it. It's fun. Obviously, there's a certain point at which we have to be careful. You know, I'm not like pro tech to the point where I just say everybody should, like, I'm not saying we should all own a nuclear bomb because, you know, and then only, you know, we're not going to outlaw a nuclear bomb because someone might use it inappropriately. No, there are certain types of technology that bear far too much risk for anyone to have or for it to even exist. And I think that, you know, those are the outliers. Those are the absurd things that are out there. All in all, I think, you know, like I said, we don't ban cars, we don't ban guns, we don't ban, you know, a lot of things. And this goes back to a philosophy I have as well. You know, a lot of people get confused. They feel like we should have laws against things that are immoral. You have to really ask yourself, should you really have laws that legislate morality? I don't think you should. Not everything that is immoral is illegal. Cheating on your wife is not illegal. Is it immoral? Yes. Should we have a law now that says if you cheat on your wife, you should be thrown in jail?
There'd be a lot of people in jail.
Yeah, there would be. And I don't think that we should legislate morality. It's my thoughts. I don't think everything that is immoral should be illegal. I'm not a fan of rules and regulations in so much as I'm a big fan of morality and doing the right thing. I'm a big fan of educating and influencing and getting people to, you know, to understand the value in making a moral choice. But I don't want laws that force it. I don't think that that's truly effective. You're not winning the hearts and minds of the people. You're not changing them anyway.
Yeah.
You're just forcing them to do to follow your moral code. I don't want people to do it because it's law. I want people to do it because they feel it's wrong or right, you know. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. I hope that clears it up. I think we often, you know, I hear this a lot with like lighted knocks or a Bluetooth knock or any kind of, you know, long range rifle, people immediately go to, well, now everybody's just going to wound everything. And now everybody's just going to take these really bad shots because now they have the potential to think they can make shots that they can't. There is always that potential with every tool we use. At some point, you have to be, which side of the fence are you on? Are you the guy that is like, okay, we should ban them all because people might abuse them? Are you the guy, like where I stand, it's not a decision I'm willing. I'd rather educate people on the right and wrong of what we do and help people respect. Again, I look at it more or less in terms of, for example, this year on the Coos deer, small target, not sure the yardage. Turned out it was within 24 yards. It looked more like 35 yards. It's so small.
Shooting up like a puppy with horns.
Yeah.
Can't hardly tell how big they are.
But being able to come to full draw range and get an exact pin, I made an efficient shot. It died very quickly. Contrast that with some other guys that are in the same situation. They don't know the yardage. They range. They adjust their dial. The animal moves slightly. Now they're not sure if it's
now they're going to pin
where
gap.
It's at. They pin gap, they guess, and they hit the animal still. They just don't hit them great.
Wouldn't pin gapping be just as bad?
To me, it's the Garmin Zero falls in the same camp as any rangefinder. In fact, it's hard for me to understand why anyone that uses a rangefinder could find fault with using a Garmin Zero. To be honest, you're saving some time and some other things, but
you're removing the hip motion of taking the rangefinder from your hip to your face and back again.
Right, you are, but you're still using the same technology.
Exact same technology.
And you're just removing the time it takes. You get precious seconds, I'll mind you, precious seconds. But so to me, though, if you have those people who will use a rangefinder, range something, and then the argument when rangefinders first came out was similar to what David is saying. Well, I'm afraid that now rangefinders will make people think they can shoot farther than they can. Now that they know it's 55 yards, they can now set a pin for that distance and take shots they would never take if they had to guess. If they had to guess 70 yards, it's hard when you're out 70, 75 yards. It's like, well, without a rangefinder, is that 75 yards or is it 65 yards? And let's say you're off by 3 yards. 72 yards and it was really 75 yards. When you start reaching out that far, depending on your setup, you could be losing, 6 inches per foot or more on every shot. So, or per yard. You're talking about major misses. By having a rangefinder, it gave people the ability to shoot farther, period, with greater accuracy. I don't see how the Zero really increases or decreases what we have already today in terms of, people feeling like they can shoot farther than they can. Honestly, I think that nothing but experience really teaches someone what their real range is in a live or die situation. I know some guys that just this year that missed shots at like 15 yards on giant mule deer. When wounded animals or killed them and couldn't find them. It's the risk that comes with hunting. And all of that's hard. You're going to have mistakes that people make. I feel like that Zero has helped me make precise shots. Where in the past, there's an element of estimation that I've needed to use in order to try to harvest an animal with a bow. Been a little less accurate, still hitting the animal, just not with precision. Anyway.
Thanks for the question, Dave.
Yep. Thank you. One more thing before we get into the podcast, negative, positive comment. We sort of have this theme every now and then where we say we read the mean things and the nice things, and
it's fun.
Here's one that came out on Instagram or on iTunes. This is a little bit ago from an old episode, a year ago. GB Scott 4 leaves us this comment. It was 1 star on iTunes. A little harsh, I thought. It says, read this and tell me I'm wrong. I tried really hard to give this podcast a shot, but after listening to the weird Christy Titus podcast, I can't go another minute. First off, these guys are much more skilled in killing big game, in much better shape than me, and have done a lot cooler stuff than I will probably ever do. But this podcast is really garbage. In particular, the Christy Titus episode. You can tell these guys are seriously delusional. Talking about how their upbringing was way hardcore because they got into a fight at some sheep show convention. In my opinion, bros who get into friendly fistfights in public do so as giant attention grab. On top of that, the weird sexual dynamic and 40-year-old virgin style flirting with someone they talk about being as close as their sister is as awkward and embarrassing. Apart from this terrible episode, the technical topics are repeated news, i.e. arrow building podcast, and the hunting stories are, at best, over-delivered like typical J-bros in the gym. Listen to the episodes with good guests. Maybe I am old school, but I hope this fad of loud, immodest juicers in operator shirts dies as quick as it came. It's a bad look for hunting, and I expected more out of a special forces operator, which Aaron was not a special forces operator. Even if he does name drop that title like it's his job and isn't selling arginine to preteens, which Aaron's never claimed he was a special forces operator. I know these guys are cool deep down. The love for conservation and wild places is there, but the face of the podcast doesn't show it. Everybody has an opinion.
Haters gonna hate?
Well, that podcast was after a long weekend. I think it was at the ATA show.
Ugh.
I'm not sure. Christy Titus and Aaron Snyder have been friends for, I know, eons. And they've been to, from when she first got into the hunting industry and was really involved in it, as Aaron too. They kind of grew up, once they got into that space. And they have a lot of old stories. And yeah, Aaron got into a fight with someone at the sheep show. It was a little weird. Anyway, I just think, I don't know, it's one episode. It's one.
Mm-hmm.
And
out of, at that time, there's close
300?
to 300?
I don't know, 280. And Aaron and Christy have an odd relationship. But I thought that it was real. What you saw was real. There was no, which was kind of refreshing. Christy and Aaron were just being as normal as
There's
normal.
something that happens when you put these headsets on. You are now in your own world. It doesn't matter if you're at a show and there's a bunch of people. It's just you and your friends there.
Well,
no one else exists.
That's the beauty of it. It brings on these conversations that people would normally not have.
I'm just kidding. That guy might have jumped in and what might have felt very intimate. I mean, when I talk with my friends very differently than when I talk with people I don't know very well.
As far as the technical topics being repeated, arrow building podcast and so on, I mean, I think that those things are always changing.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people want something this year.
Yep.
What's your latest thoughts on arrow building compared to, last year? I don't know. I felt like there was some criticism here that was really just pointed at the fact that there's a real stereotype, this loud, immodest juicers. Like neither Aaron and I took steroids. I never have.
He admits that he's not as fit as you guys. So I'm imagining this is coming from a guy who's a little overweight and a little jealous and a little...
Yeah, I'm not...
He's in that camp of, you don't need to be fit to hunt.
Well, this idea that we're immodest juicers in operator shirts, and that's our image, man, that's just not that's not the image I think, So anyway, when he says it's a bad look for hunting, especially when you're special forces, and Aaron drops that title like it's his job. Aaron's never said he was in special forces, so I don't know. In fact, he's clarified it multiple times where people have said, you're in it. And he's like, no, I was not SF. So kind of weird. It was 1 star. It was really harsh. But hey, that happens. This is a nice one.
Some balm for the wound.
It says, among my favorite hunting podcasts, and I listen to every episode as soon as they're available. Great combination of information, humor, storytelling, etc. Not much better to listen to during the off season for some fall motivation. And that's Magnum TI 625. We have to really dig because there's really not that many negative comments on iTunes. It's like a fraction. There's like 5.
You have 5 1-stars, and one of those is an accident.
And then there's like 2,000 something
reviews,
really positive reviews. So appreciate it. But now and then it's interesting to read. It just keeps you humble, I guess, keeps you thinking. Maybe we really failed on that episode with Christy. Some of you guys might have to go back and listen to it now and tell me what you think. Leave a comment below on the YouTube channel there, or send us a DM on Instagram. As always, appreciate everybody tuning into the podcast. Enjoy this episode with Ryan Michler. Tell me what you think. Give him a follow. Look into the Order of Man. And as always, stay gritty, my friends. I want to get into another discussion here about hunting.
Yeah.
Okay. And in this case, get into how do the concepts we've discussed today, I guess, from responsibility and ownership to masculinity, violence, all these these things we've covered, how do they translate into hunting, and how does hunting translate back?
Yeah. I think if we're talking about manliness in general, I think there's a direct correlation. In fact, let me back up. I think even maybe at a deeper meaning than that is just understanding and not being ignorant about where your food comes from. I think that's probably the most important reason anybody would consider hunting, is they bridge the gap between where our food comes from and how it actually gets into our bodies. And I think the more you know about that process, the more informed you are, the more educated you are about it, the more likely you are to make better choices with your body and realize, okay, this isn't just something that I can just eat at Burger King on a whim or whatever and drive down the road, that there's actually, again, purpose and meaning behind the food that I'm consuming, which will enrich your life. If you don't have to fight for things, it's not going to enrich your life. It just won't. You have to fight. You have to struggle. And the more you do, the more you appreciate those things. That's why I've loved the journey so far. It's only been I started, my first hunt was in November of 2017. So like a year and a half.
Wow.
So not that long.
Yeah.
But I found a real sense of satisfaction knowing that I'm bridging the gap between nature and how our ancestors harvested the land and conserved the land and were good stewards over the land and the food that I consume and put on the table for my family.
When you bring that protein into the house, right? You go out and you put in the effort and the work and the striving to bring that in, and you do it in a semi-primitive way. Mm-hmm. Meaning you're not raising it on a ranch.
No, you're throwing a stick at it.
Yeah, and so when that happens and you're successful and you come home from that, what has that sort of? For me, I learned real quick that getting protein back in the day was like a major job.
Oh yeah. It was. I think a lot of times we think that the hunting party went out and they just like killed deer and then came back and everybody's fine. I'm realizing I can't even do that with the technology I have, let alone the technology they had.
Right.
Like this wasn't like, oh, we're just going to go out and get a deer here and we'll be back in a couple hours. No, that's not how this played out. It's pretty crazy to think about.
Yes. And I think what that's done for me is I've realized that animals, that the process, I don't take for granted any of the food that I have in my house, mm-hmm. that protein source was hard won.
Right.
And we live in a society, like you said, at the very outset of this podcast, where we don't really have to work mm-hmm. to function.
Right.
And to function at a high level, because so much comes so easily. Mm-hmm. And so it's allowed us to be out of touch with the world around us and the striving, like you said. Anytime you don't have to strive in order to reap rewards or benefits, yeah, you can get lost real quick.
Well, you're just weaker. You're just a weaker individual. And I'm not saying that as a demeaning thing. I'm just saying an individual who is more capable is always going to be a stronger individual, whether or not he always has to use those skills. Because look, I don't eat 100% of the food I eat isn't harvested by me.
Yeah.
But I am a stronger person because I have some fundamental knowledge of how to go out and do that thing. So I'm a stronger person. It's moving the needle where I want it to go, which is to be more capable and self-reliant.
And you can say hunting has done that for you?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. There's a lot of things that have done that for me, but hunting has been a big component of that. So I started the Order of Man journey 4 years ago. And just a little backstory here. I won't get too much into a tangent here. I grew up without a permanent father figure in my home. My dad was out of the picture by that time I was 3. I may have talked about this in the last podcast. Had a couple of stepfathers come into my life momentarily. weren't great examples. I had a couple of high school sports coaches who, phenomenal men, really did a lot for me when they didn't have to. But I didn't really have this role model of like, how does a man show up for his family and his wife and his kids and his community and his clients, everybody he's trying to serve. And what I've done over the past 4 years is really an exploration into how do I become a better man. And I've had a lot of people say things like, oh, you're just overcompensating, oh, you're trying too hard. And to that I say, BS. Like, when is it bad for an individual to step more fully into who he is or try to discover more fully who he is? Which is one of the reasons I wanted to get into hunting, because I realized that traditionally speaking, hunting is the man's role. And so I needed to understand how I could be a better man. So I needed to step into that. I needed to walk down that path.
What do you think when someone says, well, that sounds really sexist, that's the man's role?
Maybe it is. Maybe it is sexist. It's because we have been evolutionarily programmed and hardwired to operate that way. I mean, just look at a man. Generally, he's bigger and stronger. Period. What else do you need to know? He's the protector. He's the provider. That's all I need to know. Now, there's a lot of other evidence that we can point at, but...
And we live in a modern society that makes you think that those gender roles aren't as critical as they used to be.
And look, let's be real about it. They're not. Because
I know until something catastrophic happens.
That's right. In the situation in which we are.
Yeah,
that's right.
In the modern
right.
man's dilemma, modern man's life. Yeah, these traditional roles seem, I think, on the surface as less important.
Right.
But I don't believe that that's the case, and that's why you see a decay in modern society now.
Well, I think there's a lot of guys who are confused because inherently they know what they're supposed to do, right? Like, we know we're supposed to provide. Talk with a guy who's laid off or who's hung up from an injury or an illness. Talk with him and see how he feels about how he's showing up in life. I guarantee you he feels like he's inadequate because, frankly speaking, he might be. He might not be living up to his expectation. That's a disheartening thing. So a lot of people will say, well, the reason men are depressed, and we see suicide rates up to 4 times as high as in men than we do than women. The reason that is because they've been suppressing their emotions for too long. No, that's not the reason. The reason is because they're not behaving like men, and they know it. And they're confused about, hey, I know I'm supposed to do these things. Society's telling me that's not my role or not my place. And every time I try to go and step into this calling of being a man, I'm undermined, I'm mocked, I'm ridiculed, I'm belittled. What do? And so we have these guys who are like, I really don't, I'm lost. And yet the men who step more fully into those responsibilities of being a protector, a provider, and a presider over himself, his family, his business, his community are the men who are thriving, not only physically, but emotionally and mentally as well.
And financially.
Right, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're doing what they were bred to do.
They're being a man.
Right. Now, to go back to the hunting thing, I know women who are hunters. In fact, women who are significantly better hunters than I am.
Me too.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that a woman isn't capable of some of the things that a man is. Of course. Just like a man can be capable of some things that women are.
Yeah.
But in an ideal situation, we have these characteristics and traits and abilities and talents that if we learn to harness and step more fully into, we will be that much more satisfied. I know it. I know that when I go out on a hunt, and I was on a hunt in Arizona about 3 weeks ago, and unfortunately I wasn't able to harvest mule deer while I was down there, but I came out of the wilderness a better man, more capable. I had more experiences to draw from. I felt enriched and uplifted. I spent time around other men. It was a good thing. It was something that I needed to experience and that too many men, frankly, aren't experiencing.
So you've kind of touched on how hunting has helped you grow and become, I guess, in some sense, more of a man, a better man.
In every sense.
Okay. So how do the concepts of and ideas covered in the Order of Man podcast, in your messaging, how did those concepts translate into making one a better hunter?
That's a good question. Well, I think in order to answer that, we have to look at the traits of what would make a good hunter. And here's what I see. You fill in the blanks because you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. But definitely planning, the ability to plan, the ability to be patient, the ability to think strategically, the ability to adapt in certain circumstances with unforeseen events and variables that you can't always quite plan for. I don't know what else. I mean, there's a thousand different traits we can talk about. A grit, right?
Yeah.
Resiliency, toughness, resolve, physical fitness, mental and emotional resilience and toughness. A lot of times we're going out with other guys, right? So the camaraderie of building a band of brothers and having a tribe and other men to bond with and learn from and hold each other accountable. You missed that shot. What's going on? That forces you to be better next time, right?
What are some things you've done outside of hunting then that have made you a better hunter? Or prepared you for being a hunter, period?
Yeah, I think just being in the gym has been a huge component of that. Right? Because you're walking around, you're putting 10 to 12 miles on a day. That's a challenge. You know, it's really easy to get discouraged too when you're hunting.
Yeah.
So how do you deal
with
that?
Talk about frustrations.
Right. And how do you if you've never been in a hard situation, what you would do. And I've done this where I've literally caught myself saying, oh, you're not a good hunter. This must not be for you. That's what I've said to myself. Yeah. I'm like, well, of course you're not a good hunter. You've been doing it for 12 months.
Yeah, right.
Like, what were you ever good at that you very rarely actually did?
Yeah.
But I know that because I have a set of parameters in which I can draw upon, right? Or I should say a set of experiences that I can draw upon. I can draw upon sports as a young man and realize that as hard as I tried, we just didn't win the game. You deal with it and you come back better. I mean, there's all kinds of little.
This kind of leads into my questions for you around jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Because I haven't done it yet. I plan to go and start doing it, but I can imagine getting choked out over and over, or at least being completely manhandled by someone maybe smaller or weaker than you physically.
Not even maybe, absolutely.
And then you're just like, you just feel, and then it could just suck as well. It's a grind. It's physically demanding. It's humbling.
Yeah.
And I even heard Jocko talking about guys that come in that are physical phenoms that are also pretty good at jiu-jitsu, but they end up coming in, they have these expectations of dominating, and they get dominated, and they never show up again to the gym.
Yeah, it's an ego thing.
And then there's guys that actually are like, okay, I'm coming back because clearly there were a lot of holes in my previous notions about myself were completely wrong.
Yeah.
They've been shattered, and now I'm going to address it. That's the difference between someone who takes ownership and someone who doesn't. Someone who takes responsibility and someone who hides from responsibility. Someone who has ego and someone who checked it at the door.
Yeah.
I can imagine, developing grit and developing, strength in adversity in that arena.
Yeah.
And then you go out and you go hunting and you fail and you're like, yeah, but at least, I'm not getting choked out on the floor like I've been in this this other place that's been rough, right. And I've been grinding through it. I can handle this 17-mile hike today.
The thing to me that I've thought about over the past several years is that I'm going to face hardship in my life. I can either allow that to not be on my terms, to let some unforeseen event put that hardship upon me, or I can voluntarily walk into it. So I'm more adequately prepared to deal with it when it happens. And it will happen. Somebody will get divorced. You'll get injured. You'll lose your job. You'll go through a bankruptcy. There's all kinds of different things that can happen. And unless you have, I use the term, inoculated yourself against some of those things, you're not going to be prepared for that. And that's what jiu-jitsu is starting to do for me. And I had a friend who invited me, and another friend said, oh, you should try it. And I finally said, okay, fine, I'll go try it. And the most I'd ever gotten involved in like a combat type sport would be 1 year of wrestling in high school, which I really enjoyed. So I went into jiu-jitsu with my own set of expectations. I'm a strong guy. Like, I pride myself on being fit. I don't know anything about jiu-jitsu, but
in the military.
I can handle myself. I'll be fine. So I get into that first class, and they teach like half an hour or so of instruction on a specific move or hold or something. I can't remember exactly what we did. And they said, all right, we're going to do some just rolling, right? So you're paired up with somebody. So the instructor was like, here, I'm going to pair you up with this guy. And what do we do is, man, we size each other up, right? I'm
right.
Like, oh, look at this guy. Probably got 30 pounds, maybe 40 pounds on this. Kind of looked a little nerdy. I'm like, no problem. And so we go, and I'm like, well, what do I do? He's like, you just roll. I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means. So I'm like getting physical with this guy, and God, within maybe 30 seconds, he's got me in a triangle and he's just choking me out. I'm like, ugh. And it was so humbling to know that this guy who's 30 or 40 pounds lighter than me literally manhandled me in a matter of 30 or 40 seconds. It was embarrassing, but it also opened something up in me too. It helped me to recognize, okay, there's some flaws here. Not only your game, but there's some flaws in your mindset too.
Right.
Right? Like, how do you strengthen the mind and strengthen the body? And that's what I've learned over going to jiu-jitsu is you learn patience and you learn resilience and you learn how far you can go. That's what I've noticed is like, if somebody's got my arm or they've got their hand around my neck, like, can I survive? That little test with myself, not necessarily against the other guy, but that test with myself makes me a better person. Gives me a different perspective so that when I'm facing challenges in what I would call real world, it's not as threatening. It's like, okay, breathe. Somebody's got their arm around your neck. Breathe. Figure out what's going on. Strategize. How are you going to keep yourself from being submitted? What's your next move? And so you start playing all these things out. I think every man should be involved with frankly, violence. Another individual trying to hurt you. And that's the point of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
The point of jiu-jitsu is I want to hurt you so much so that you will give up. And you're trying to do that. Something very powerful about that.
Definitely. I think it's the next level that, a one-on-one combat type sport is another level of, challenge.
Right.
Compared to like if you played football.
Oh, yeah.
Or basketball. Like all sports, I think, test you and push limits and teamwork and ability and all that.
Yeah, but in basketball and football, maybe football, there's another objective.
Right.
The objective is to score.
Totally.
To get to the end zone.
And I can see like parts of what you're describing in an aggressive game of football.
For sure. There's an element of that.
And there's a little bit of one-on-one.
Yeah.
When you're running down the field and it's you versus that guy that's coming at you and so on.
Right.
But that's that next level when you're going into what you're describing in this combat sport kind of scenario.
The other thing I like about jiu-jitsu and wrestling and martial arts in general is you can't hide. And that's a good thing. Because you can hide. In any other sport, you can hide.
Yeah.
You can hide out. You can take it easy. You can rest. You can not do your training. And you can kind of coast and hide out. But in a combat sport like that, you're in a ring or on a mat. You're half naked. And it's just you and another individual. There's no hiding. Everybody's going to know really quickly whether you did what you were supposed to do or you didn't.
Yeah.
And there's no excuses. Somebody beats you on the mat, there's no excuse. I can't blame it on you. I can't blame it on the mat. I mean, maybe sometimes I hear guys want to blame it on the ref or whatever. It's like, no, it's you. You were inadequate. But that's okay because
that's how
you're going to take this for feedback and you're going to learn, he got me in this triangle. And I remember I was submitted to a triangle so many times when I very first, and I still do. I still do that. But I reached out to my buddy and I'm like, man, like they always get me in a triangle. What am I doing? He's like, let me show you. And he worked me through it. I'm like, oh, okay. And now I get submitted less in triangles, right? Like I still get there, but less.
Right.
Because I'm getting better. I'm improving. And I use hardship as feedback to get better in my life.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I want to find it and I'm going to
You'll love it, man.
Into it.
You have the mentality for it, right? First of all, you're athletic. Second of all, I mean, the whole premise is grit, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take resolve. It's going to take grit.
I like competition. I played basketball all throughout my youth. Mm-hmm. I'm not the tallest guy, but I was quick and I was strong and I got good jumps.
Yeah.
I can jump.
Yeah.
But what I like about it mostly is I'm an extremely physical player. Extremely physical.
Your brother's laughing. Dominating guys on the basketball court.
That are, 6 inches taller than me. I could just push them off the block. Yeah. I mean, I got the hands and the glutes that are made for.
Brian's got gorilla man hands, thick thighs, and ass calves.
All that's going to be good for you.
Like my
hands. Yeah. See, look at the difference,
dude. I have giant hands.
That's going to be good for gripping.
And look at his thumb. Look at that turkey.
I can palm a basketball.
Holy crap! Look at the difference.
How
tall are you?
5'10".
Yeah, so we're the same height.
Yeah, and so I feel like I can do. People have seen me do a seated box jump. I can pretty much just leave the floor and float to above my head,
Yeah.
you know. So there's
That's going to be good for jiu-jitsu.
so those kind of things I'm good at. Then there's the things I'm not good at, which we won't really cover right now.
Yeah, we don't want to get there.
But one thing I miss the most, and the one thing I liked about doing sports, and like I said in basketball, it was the physicality of it. It was using my body to get better position, you know, working under the hoop with guys way bigger than me.
Yeah.
And that physical one-on-one clashing, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't interested in taking a 3-point shot without anybody nearby.
Brian's move is to get the ball and drive straight down the key no matter who's there.
Whoever's there.
Ram it down people's throats.
I love it.
And so
I love it, man.
I'm just competitive, and I like that physical part. That's why I kind of am very interested in this. I just have never really got into it before.
I think you'll love it. I mean, look, I've thought about this because I say this, you know, every once in a while I post a picture of me hunting or in jiu-jitsu or whatever. And inevitably, someone will say, a man doesn't need to hunt. A man doesn't. I agree. You don't have to hunt to be a man. You don't have to do jiu-jitsu to be a man. But every man should do both of those things. You don't have to. It's up to you.
Right.
But every single man should be a hunter. Every single man should participate in mixed martial arts, because there's just elements about those two practices that you just won't get anywhere else.
Well, and I would argue that if you're alive today, if you're a human being alive today, it is because your ancestors excelled at two things: battle, right?
Yeah,
Fighting period,
right,
and hunting.
Survival of the fittest, man.
Without those two things,
your grandparents aren't getting together. Your great grandparents aren't getting together.
They're not happening.
No, sir.
And not just in a dominance hierarchy kind of way, but in a competence hierarchy. You know, I like the way Jordan Peterson puts it. Like, you also wouldn't be here alive today if you couldn't negotiate. If you couldn't
communicate,
if you couldn't
teamwork,
if you couldn't work with other men, if you couldn't attract a woman, right? Like, all these things you're alive today though, because you have your ancestors were able to pull those things off.
You have the formula.
Yeah. But two things that I think stand out among men much, we wouldn't be alive today if humans didn't figure out how to hunt. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't be the species, the creatures we are,
of course not,
if we couldn't hunt. And secondly, we wouldn't be here if we couldn't fight,
right? Because
that's part of making it this far, right? Those are two of the most primal parts of being a human, and have probably been around among the longest of what it means to be a human.
Oh, I'm sure of it.
And so those two things in modern society are probably the two things that are least required in our society for the modern man.
That's right.
You don't have to fight. I'm like 40, almost 45 years old. I don't really have to do much fighting. Never have had to. I don't have to hunt. No. I can go to the grocery store. Those two things, which are the two things that make us human beings and have probably been the two of the greatest reasons why we've survived and come this far, two of the most important aspects of being human, are the two things that we really don't ever have to do now.
Right.
That's a little messed up and should give you pause and should make you consider, maybe I should do those things, and maybe those things could, in fact, fill some void that I don't realize is there.
I think that's a great point. I mean, here's what people say. We've evolved out of those things, right? We've evolved out of hunting. We've evolved out of fighting. Maybe to some degree we have, but And this is, I heard my friend Jack Donovan talk about this. He talked about masculinity. He says, in ancient times, we had to be men. We had to. There was no choice. If we weren't men, the way that men show up, we would die and our families and communities would die. And now it's a choice. Mm-hmm. You don't have to protect. You don't have to even provide. You don't have to do those things. But voluntarily deciding to step into those things makes you a more capable, you said this earlier, competent and satisfied human being. We have to voluntarily make these decisions. And I think that hunting and jiu-jitsu are a big part of it.
Well, I think along these terms that I don't think that human beings have evolved out of those things as long as we remain human beings. Because here's the thing that I see is humans in general, there will always be evil people.
There's always going to be a threat.
And let's classify evil, okay? Because a lot of people, I don't think they understand what evil means.
Well, a lot of people have never faced it, fortunately. And that's a good thing. Because there's men who are willing to fight against it.
Totally. Masculine men.
Right.
Because when you look at evil, okay, there's tragedy, right? A hurricane.
Sure.
A storm, an earthquake, a car accident, the things that are just sort of, that just happen, that are sad. They're forces of nature, things that just happen.
Right.
But then there's evil, and that is the conscious, immoral decision of another human to inflict pain and suffering on other humans.
Another human. Right.
That's it. There's just downright, that's evil.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And that doesn't go away. That will never
go away because in each human is that yin and yang. There's that good and there's that bad. And there's some human beings who, with consciousness, understand and embrace evil in a horrible and destructive way.
If all we do is feminize the men who are capable of fighting against that, we don't make society better. We make it worse because we've eliminated any sort of defense against that violence and evil.
That podcast that Jocko read about that serial killer back in like the 1900s, 1910.
I don't know if I listened to that one.
It's disturbing.
Hole or Pod?
It's
What's his
disturbing.
name? Guy had a weird name.
Oh, I did. No, I did listen to that one.
Wild.
Yes, I did listen to that one.
Just a dark human being. But he said, might is right. That was his philosophy.
That was his philosophy.
Right? So whoever was the strongest could do whatever he wanted and whatever he wanted.
And he exercised that.
Was right. Right. So he would lure guys onto a boat and get them drunk and then murder them and drop them in the ocean and do all kinds of sodomy and all kinds of like dark things. Right. Mm-hmm. The man's just evil to the core.
Yeah.
And felt justified in everything. He wanted to destroy humanity. He's like, if I could, I would kill all of humanity. I just am not smart enough or powerful enough to do it. So I'll just do it among those I am stronger than and more powerful than to do. That evil, it exists. It's out there today. There are human beings that want to destroy you or your family. There are people who, you look at ISIS. I mean, it's just a darkness, a blight on the planet. As long as that exists, men need to be able to fight.
Yeah,
they need to be able to fight and be and so I feel
use some of that toxic masculinity, right?
And I feel like that is something that, like I said, modern society doesn't necessarily require of us in certain circles, but it's something that we should be prepared for. It's much like knowing how to use a weapon. I feel it falls into that category as well.
Right.
Being competent in the case of things going south.
Right. Hopefully you never have to be in that situation. But if you are, you don't want to be the individual who doesn't know how to handle himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the whole adage, better to be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in the war. Right.
Right. Absolutely. I like that one.
Yeah.
Ryan, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast, brother.
Course, man. Thanks for having me on. I love these conversations.
Important conversations,
For
I
sure.
think. I'm glad to see you getting out there and hunting. I'm glad to see the Order of Man podcast thriving for folks that are out there. You can find the Order of Man on Instagram.
Yep. Instagram.
At Order of Man.
Yep. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook.
You're also
all the places.
Ryan Michler at Ryan Michler.
Yep.
On Instagram.
I do a lot more over there, actually.
You do.
My personal stuff.
And then you have iTunes and Podbean and
all that fun stuff.
Wherever
you
you
listen to podcasts,
you can find it.
Wherever you're listening to this one, you can find ours as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, do you put anything on YouTube? Do you have a YouTube channel?
I have. I just put the David Goggins interview up, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Because I want to start doing. I need to get something set up like you guys have
some
here.
video. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important. We're already having the conversation, so audio. We might as well get the video going too. So we'll be doing a lot more video moving forward as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's leave people with one nugget here. Okay.
Okay.
Two nuggets.
2 nuggets. Okay.
One, you're kind of a newer hunter.
Yes. Not a very successful one yet. When you wanted to ask about hunting, I'm like, I'm not the guy to ask about hunting.
I love it that you're engaged and you're doing it, though.
I love it too.
What have you found is what's a piece of advice as a brand new hunter you have for a new hunter that's out there?
Be coachable. That's what it is, man. Every hunt that I've gone on, I haven't gone on a hunt by myself. I've gone on a hunt with people who have been hunting significantly longer than me. And I think just in general, men tend to be inflated with their confidence and their arrogance and their skill set.
Yeah.
Recognize that you are not the expert. Recognize that there's all sorts of little learning opportunities. When I was down in Arizona, my spotter was walking me into a deer. I was stalking that deer. And long story short, didn't end up working out. I came back up. He's like, man, I just really appreciate you listening to me. I'm like, well, why wouldn't I? Like, you had the eyes. You've been doing it longer than I have. He's like, yeah, but you'd be surprised at how many guys just feel like they want to do it their own way. Mm-hmm. So I try to be a sponge. I try to be receptive of everything I possibly can, from what type of camo should I be wearing to what type of broadheads are best to use in what situations, how to stop. I mean, whatever I can consume, and then I implement it.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say there.
Next question and last question. If you knew someone was going to read a book, they have one book to choose from, one book that you could
force them to
read.
No matter what book you pick, they are going to end up reading it.
Well,
what book
I
is that?
hate to take the easy route, but I would say the Bible. I mean, the Bible has so many parallels. That book was written for us. There are so many parallels about our lives. There's so many lessons. There's so many stories that can be extracted. There's so many, we talked about self-imposed limitations. There's so many, I don't even like the word limitations, but I like the word parameters. There's so many parameters in which we can operate that will lead to a healthy life. I feel like that's a cop-out a little bit, though, because that's like what everybody goes to automatically. Can I do two?
Yeah. I like the Bible, though.
Yeah, I mean,
I especially like Cain and Abel.
Yeah,
story.
That's what I'm saying. Like, so many parallels about good and evil, right?
Yep.
And the nature of man. That's what
Yep.
we've been talking about. Yep. Another book, As a Man Thinketh, I would say, by James Allen.
Was just saying.
Were you? Yeah.
That was the book.
I mean, the 6 inches between our ears is so powerful. So much more powerful than I think probably all of us give it credit.
Yeah.
And I think if we can get our minds right, and I'm not into the whole like The Secret and will it to you. I'm not like totally into that. But there's, in my life, when I give energy to something, time, energy, resources, thoughts, though, whether it happens immediately or it manifests itself in 10 years, in my life, I've recognized that anytime I give something attention, it happens. It happens. It comes to life.
Yeah.
So, As a Man Thinketh by James Allen would be my second book.
And
awesome, brother.
Yeah.
It's only an afternoon to read that whole book.
Yeah, it's a quick read. Very, very powerful.
Thank you, Ryan.
Appreciate you, man.
Appreciate it.
Good times.
All right. Stay gritty, folks.